My name is Pete, and I am 32 years old. I spent 5 years saving for my dream apartment in Boston, only to have my own mother try to steal it from me. What was supposed to be a normal Sunday dinner turned into an orchestrated ambush with my entire family pressuring me to give up my home for my pregnant sister Madison. They thought they had me cornered, but they did not know about the 17 recordings that would expose their entire scheme. Before I dive into how my own mother tried to steal my home right from under me, drop a comment letting me know if your family has ever betrayed your trust, and subscribe to hear more unbelievable but true family stories. Finding my apartment was like discovering buried treasure. After years of renting cramped places with paper-thin walls and temperamental plumbing, I finally found a place that felt like home. It was in an old brownstone in the Back Bay area of Boston, with high ceilings, original hardwood floors, and windows that flooded the space with natural light. The building itself had character with its ornate moldings and a small courtyard that provided a surprising oasis in the middle of the city. I remember walking through it the first time and knowing immediately this was where I wanted to live. Getting there was anything but easy. I worked as a software developer for a financial technology company, pulling 60-hour weeks for 5 years straight. While my friends were taking vacations and buying new cars, I lived in a studio apartment that barely fit my bed and desk, ate ramen more often than I care to admit, and saved every extra penny. I opened a separate savings account specifically for my down payment, and watched it grow month by month, sometimes adding only a few $100s, but never withdrawing a single cent. The apartment cost $420,000, which felt like an astronomical sum. But in Boston's competitive real estate market, it was actually a good deal for a 2-bedroom place in such a desirable location. My friend Jackson owned the building, which helped. We had gone to college together, and when he inherited the building from his grandfather, he renovated it, unit by unit. When apartment 3B became available, he called me before listing it publicly. "Pete, I know you have been saving up," he said. "This one has your name all over it. Come see it before I put it on the market." I still had to secure a mortgage and pay market rate, but Jackson gave me first dibs and walked me through the process. I will never forget the day I signed the final papers. I stood in what was now my living room, keys in hand, and felt a sense of achievement I had never experienced before. This was mine. I had earned it. Over the next 2 years, I made it truly my own. I could not afford to renovate everything at once, so I tackled projects one by one. I redid the kitchen myself, installing new cabinets and countertops over a series of weekends. I refinished the hardwood floors, discovering a beautiful pattern beneath years of wear. I painted each room, choosing colors that made the space feel both energizing and peaceful. Every nail I hammered, every wall I painted, increased my emotional investment in the place. My life settled into a comfortable rhythm. I was doing well at work, having been promoted to senior developer. I had been dating Rachel for about a year, a pediatric nurse I met when I donated blood at a hospital drive. She spent several nights a week at my place, but we were taking things slow, both focused on our careers. I had good friends, a 5-minute walk to my favorite coffee shop, and a home that made me feel proud every time I walked through the door. Everything changed about 2 months ago, during a routine family dinner at my parents' house. My sister Madison announced she was pregnant with twins. Everyone was ecstatic, especially my mother Barbara, who had been dropping hints about wanting grandchildren for years. Madison and her husband Tyler had been married for 3 years and had been trying to conceive for the last 2. My father, Gerald, popped champagne with sparkling cider for Madison, of course, and we all toasted to the new additions to our family. Looking back, I should have noticed the way my mother looked at me during that dinner. There was something calculating in her expression as her eyes darted between me and Madison. At the time, I dismissed it as her being emotional about becoming a grandmother. I could not have imagined what was actually going through her mind. The first sign that something was off came about 3 weeks after Madison's pregnancy announcement. My mother started calling me more frequently than usual, which was not necessarily strange in itself. Barbara had always been involved in her children's lives, sometimes to the point of being overbearing. What struck me as odd was the content of these calls. "Pete, did you hear that Madison is having terrible morning sickness?" she said during one call. "The doctor says it is worse with twins. She can barely make it to work some days." Another call a few days later. "Madison had to go to the emergency room last night. Her blood pressure was elevated. Nothing serious, thank goodness, but the doctor wants her to reduce stress. Then Tyler is working overtime to save for the babies, but their apartment is a fourth-floor walk-up. The doctor says Madison should avoid stairs in the third trimester. I am so worried about them. Each call seemed designed to elicit sympathy for Madison's situation, which I genuinely felt. I loved my sister and wanted her pregnancy to go smoothly. But interspersed with these updates were comments about my own living situation that started to form a pattern. Your apartment must feel so big for just one person. My mother mentioned casually, after telling me about Madison's latest doctor appointment. That second bedroom would make a perfect nursery, she said another time. What do you even use it for? It must be nice having an elevator in your building. And being so close to Massachusetts General Hospital, she commented, referencing the hospital where Madison would deliver. I brushed off these remarks initially. My mother had always been transparent about her thoughts, and I was used to her lack of subtlety. But then Madison and Tyler came to visit one Sunday afternoon, ostensibly just to hang out and see the baseball game on my new television. While I was ordering pizza, I walked back into the living room to find Madison measuring the width of my hallway with a tape measure she had brought in her purse. "What are you doing?" I asked, confused. Madison jumped slightly, looking guilty. "Oh, just wondering if a double stroller would fit through here. Tyler's mom gave us one, but our hallway is so narrow." Throughout their visit, I noticed them taking photos of various rooms on their phones and having whispered conversations. At one point, I overheard Madison say to Tyler, "The nursery could go here, and we could put our bedroom in the master." When I mentioned this to Rachel later that night, she raised an eyebrow. "That seems strange. Why would they be planning where to put nurseries in your apartment?" "They are probably just getting ideas for their own place," I said, defending them. Madison has always used my stuff as inspiration for hers, ever since we were kids. But the incidents kept piling up. My cousin Ethan called, asking if I was planning to move anytime soon, because he was looking for a place in Boston. My father inquired about my company's remote work policy and whether I had considered relocating to be closer to their headquarters in New York. Even my Aunt Patricia, who rarely called me, rang to ask about my apartment's square footage out of curiosity. Then I came home one day to find things slightly out of place. Nothing was missing, but my desk drawers appeared to have been opened, and some papers in my filing cabinet were disordered. I initially attributed it to my own absent-mindedness, but after it happened a second time, I grew suspicious. "I think someone has been in my apartment," I told Rachel. "That is creepy," she said. "Do you think it is a break-in attempt?" "Nothing is missing. It is more like someone was looking for something." As a precaution, I installed a small security camera in my living room, disguised as a clock. I did not tell anyone about it, not even Rachel at first. I felt paranoid, but I needed to know if someone was entering my apartment without permission. 3 days later, I got an alert on my phone while at work. The camera had detected movement in my apartment. I opened the app with shaking hands and saw my mother and Madison walking around my living room. They did not have keys, which meant they had somehow convinced the building superintendent to let them in, probably by claiming it was an emergency. I watched in disbelief as they opened drawers, looked through my mail, and Madison sat at my desk accessing my computer. I could not hear what they were saying, but their actions were furtive, checking the door frequently, as if worried about being caught. This was the first of 17 recordings that would ultimately save me from their scheme. At the time, I was just confused and hurt. Why would my mother and sister sneak into my apartment? What were they looking for? I was about to find out, and the answer would shake the foundation of trust I had in my family. After discovering my mother and sister had entered my apartment without permission, I confronted them with a carefully worded text. "Next time you need something from my place, please ask me first." I did not mention the camera, wanting to see how they would respond. The reply came almost immediately from my mother, Pete. "Do not be dramatic. Madison left her prenatal vitamins at your place last visit and she needs them daily. We tried calling, but you did not answer." It was a lie. They had not called, and Madison had never left anything at my apartment. But rather than calling them out, I simply replied, "I understand. In the future, please wait until I can be there to let you in." That weekend, my mother invited me to Sunday dinner, her tone overly sweet on the phone. When I arrived, Madison and Tyler were there, along with my father. The conversation was strained, with long silences, punctuated by my mother's forced cheerfulness. After dessert, she finally revealed the reason for the dinner. "Pete, we wanted to talk to you about something important," she began exchanging glances with my father. "Madison's pregnancy is becoming more complicated. The doctor is concerned about her stress levels and the stairs at their apartment." Madison nodded, one hand resting protectively on her slightly rounded belly. "The doctor says I might need to be on bed rest soon, and our apartment is just so small and far from the hospital. We were thinking," my mother continued, "that it would be such a help if you could let Madison and Tyler stay in your apartment temporarily, just until the babies are born and they can find a more suitable place." I was speechless for a moment, connecting the dots between their unauthorized visit to my apartment and this request. "Where would I stay during this time?" I finally asked. "You could stay in Madison and Tyler's place," my father suggested. "It would just be for a few months. 6 at the most." 6 months. They wanted me to give up my home for half a year. "I am sorry, but that would not work for me," I said firmly. "I have invested a lot in my apartment, and I work from home several days a week. My setup is customized for my needs." "But this is family, Pete," my mother said, her voice taking on an edge I recognized from childhood arguments. "Madison needs help. Surely your comfort is not more important than the health of your sister and her babies." "I understand Madison needs support," I replied, trying to remain calm. "But there are other solutions. You have a guest room here, or they could look for a ground floor apartment closer to the hospital." My suggestion was met with stony silence. Then Madison began to cry, and Tyler put his arm around her protectively. "We cannot afford a different apartment right now," he said. "Not with all the medical bills and preparing for twins." By the end of the evening, I had stood my ground, but felt terrible. The ride home was filled with guilt and second-guessing. Was I being selfish? Should I sacrifice my home for family? But something about the situation felt off. Their reactions seemed disproportionate to my refusal, as if they had been counting on my agreement. The next few weeks brought an escalation I could never have anticipated. At a family birthday party for my cousin Megan, several relatives approached me with comments about my selfishness. My Uncle Robert cornered me by the drinks table. "Family should come first, Pete," he said gruffly. "Your mother is very disappointed in you." My cousin Ethan was more direct. "Dude, it is just an apartment. Madison is having babies. Get over yourself." Even relatives I rarely spoke to seemed to have opinions on my living situation. It became clear that my mother had been talking to everyone, presenting me as the villain who refused to help his pregnant sister. Then came the call from my father. Gerald had always been the more reasonable parent, often mediating between my mother's emotional intensity and my more logical approach to problems. "Pete, I need you to reconsider this apartment situation," he said, his voice uncharacteristically stern. "Your mother is very upset. She feels you are not supporting the family in a time of need." "Dad, I offered alternatives," I explained. "I even suggested helping them financially to find a suitable place. But giving up my home for 6 months is not reasonable." "Sometimes in family we do unreasonable things out of love," he replied. "Just think about it more, okay?" For me, after that call, I received a surprising message from my Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister. "Pete, can we meet for coffee tomorrow? There is something you should know." We met at a quiet cafe, away from the family's usual haunts. Patricia looked nervous, glancing around as if worried about being seen. "I should not be telling you this," she began, voice low. "But there have been conversations about you at family gatherings you have not been invited to." "What kind of conversations?" I asked, though. I had a sinking feeling I already knew. "Barbara has been planning something. I do not know all the details, but it involves your apartment. She has mentioned speaking to your landlord, finding ways to convince you to move temporarily." Patricia looked genuinely troubled. "I love my sister, but this feels wrong. I thought you should know to be careful." That warning prompted me to install more recording devices throughout my apartment, hidden in bookshelves, under the coffee table, and near the front door. I felt like I was living in a spy movie, but Patricia's warning had frightened me more than I wanted to admit. Over the next 2 weeks, the recordings captured multiple concerning incidents. My mother used her emergency key, which I had given her years ago, for actual emergencies to enter with different family members when I was at work. Recording number 2 showed her and my father looking through my lease documents in my desk drawer. Recording number 3 captured Tyler on my computer. His expression frustrated as he muttered, "I cannot find the digital lease anywhere. He must have it password protected." The 4th recording was perhaps the most disturbing. My mother on the phone in my living room, speaking to someone about me. "Pete is being difficult, but we have a plan. Yes, once we get him out it will be much harder for him to reclaim it. No, Jackson does not know yet, but we are working on that angle too." Recordings 5 through 8 documented various family members discussing the plan in vague terms, measuring rooms, taking photos of my lease documents, and at one point my mother actually practicing a speech that began, "Pete, we need to discuss what is best for the family going forward." I also discovered evidence that someone had been opening my mail, specifically communications from the building management and bank statements. A call to my bank confirmed that someone had attempted to access information about my mortgage but had been unable to provide the correct security answers. Most alarmingly, recording 8 captured a conversation between my mother and sister, in which Madison said, "Once we get the apartment, we will need to act fast to make it more permanent." To which my mother replied, "One step at a time. First we get him to agree to the temporary arrangement, then we worry about extending it." I was no longer just concerned. I was frightened by the extent of their plotting. These were not the actions of family members concerned about Madison's pregnancy. This was a coordinated effort to take my home with my mother as the orchestrator. The final confirmation came when Jackson called me. "Pete, this is awkward, but your mother contacted me about your lease. She said you were planning to sublet your apartment to your sister and wanted to know the procedure. I told her you would need to speak to me directly about any changes." "Jackson, I have no plans to sublet my apartment," I said firmly. "Please do not discuss my lease with anyone, but me, even family members." "No problem. I thought it was strange she was calling instead of you." That call solidified my suspicions into certainty. My family was trying to manipulate me out of my apartment, and they were willing to go behind my back to do it. I needed to be prepared for whatever came next, and thankfully, my recordings were building a case that would prove invaluable. The invitation arrived via text message from my mother on a Tuesday morning. "Special family dinner this Sunday at 6. Important matters to discuss. Everyone will be there. Attendance mandatory." The wording was stiff and formal, not my mother's usual style. The phrase, "attendance mandatory," particularly stood out, reminiscent of how she would summon us to family meetings when we were children and had misbehaved. I showed the message to Rachel during our dinner date that evening. "This sounds ominous," she said, frowning at my phone. "Given everything that has been happening, I do not think you should go alone." "You think they are planning something?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The recordings had made their intentions clear. "Pete, they have been entering your apartment without permission, going through your personal documents, and trying to contact your landlord behind your back. Yes, I think they are planning something, and this dinner is it." Rachel offered to accompany me, but I declined. "If this is going to be as bad as I think, I do not want to put you in that position. But maybe stay by your phone, I might need backup." Sunday arrived, and I drove to my parents' house with a knot in my stomach. The driveway was full of cars, indicating that indeed everyone was there. I recognized my Aunt Patricia's sedan, Uncle Robert's truck, and several cars belonging to cousins. This was not a regular family dinner. This was, as I would soon discover, an ambush. The house was unusually quiet when I entered, despite the number of cars outside. I found everyone in the dining room seated around the large table, as if for a formal occasion. My mother had used the good china and crystal glasses, something reserved for holidays and special announcements. My father stood at the head of the table, my mother at his right. Madison and Tyler sat together. Madison's pregnancy now more visible at 4 months. Around the table were Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert, cousins Ethan and Megan. And to my surprise, even my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Lawson, from my parents' street, who had known our family for years. "Pete, thank you for coming," my mother said, her voice carrying that saccharine tone she used when trying to manipulate a situation. "Please sit down. We have important family matters to discuss." The only empty chair was at the opposite end of the table from my father, positioning me like a defendant before a jury. I sat down, noticing how everyone avoided direct eye contact, except my mother, who stared at me with an intensity that was unsettling. We have asked you here because we need to address a family crisis. My father began reading from what appeared to be prepared notes. As you know, Madison's pregnancy has developed complications. Madison nodded on cue, placing both hands on her belly. The doctor says my blood pressure is dangerously high. I need to be on bed rest for the remainder of my pregnancy, and I need to be close to Massachusetts General for weekly monitoring. The problem, my mother continued smoothly, is that their current apartment is unsuitable. 4th floor, no elevator, small rooms, and across town from the hospital. The stress of the living situation is putting the babies at risk. I listened silently, already knowing where this was heading. We have discussed this as a family, my father said, gesturing to everyone at the table, and we believe the best solution is for you to temporarily trade apartments with Madison and Tyler. Your place is perfect elevator building, spacious 5 minutes from the hospital. We have already spoken to your building superintendent, my mother added, and he is amenable to a temporary resident swap for family medical reasons. This was news to me, and contradicted what Jackson had told me. The superintendent worked for Jackson, and would not make such arrangements without his approval. This would just be until the babies are born and Madison recovers. Tyler said, speaking for the first time, 6 months max. We would take good care of your place. Everyone was looking at me now, expecting an immediate agreement. The pressure in the room was palpable. I understand Madison's situation is difficult. I began carefully, but as I have said before, giving up my home for 6 months is not a solution I am comfortable with. I have offered financial help to find a suitable apartment closer to the hospital, or even to pay for a short-term rental. My mother's face hardened. This is not about money, Pete. This is about family. Your sister needs your specific apartment because of its location and features. Why are you being so selfish? It is not selfish to want to stay in my own home, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I have worked hard for that apartment. I have invested time and money into making it mine. Sometimes family requires sacrifice, my Aunt Patricia said quietly, though I noticed she would not meet my eyes. Now I understood why she had warned me. She had been pressured to participate in this intervention. We were hoping you would be reasonable, my mother said, her voice turning cold. But since you are being difficult, we need to move to Phase 2. Phase 2. The phrase from the recordings. My stomach dropped. My father pulled out a folder and slid several documents across the table toward me. These are the papers you will need to sign to formalize the arrangement. We have taken the liberty of preparing everything. I did not touch the papers. What exactly are these documents? Just a temporary lease transfer, my mother said dismissively. Nothing to worry about. Tyler then produced another document from his jacket pocket. We also have this statement that you verbally agreed to the arrangement last month. Just needs your signature to confirm. I had never agreed to anything of the sort. This was a blatant attempt at fraud. And my mother added, reaching into her purse, I have already spoken to Jackson. He understands the situation and is sympathetic to Madison's medical needs. He said as long as you agree, he has no problem with the swap. She placed a key on the table, sliding it toward Madison. We also had a spare key made for your apartment so Madison can start moving some essential items tomorrow. The key, the unauthorized entry. Everything clicked into place. This was not just pressure. This was a coordinated plan to force me out of my apartment with falsified documents and manipulated circumstances. The most important thing, my mother continued, her voice dropping to a concerned tone that I now recognized as completely artificial, is that we do this quickly. Madison's doctor wants her settled in a stress-free environment within the week. So we need you to sign these papers tonight and begin moving your things to Madison's apartment tomorrow. The room fell silent, all eyes on me. They had presented their case and expected immediate compliance. In their minds, the weight of family obligation, medical necessity, and their united front would make resistance impossible. What they did not know was that I had been recording their unauthorized entries into my apartment for weeks. I had evidence of their plotting their attempts to access my lease and financial information, and most damning of all, recordings of conversations revealing their true intentions. Recordings 9 through 12, which I had reviewed just yesterday, included a particularly revealing conversation between my mother and Madison in my kitchen. Once Pete moves out, we make sure he cannot easily move back in, my mother had said. We get you established there, make it the twins' first home. After a few months, he will accept the situation." Madison had laughed. "And his apartment is so much nicer than ours. Tyler thinks we could eventually buy it from Pete if he gets that promotion at work." "One step at a time," my mother had cautioned. "First we get him out. The rest will follow." Looking at them now so confident in their scheme, I realized they had no idea what I knew. They thought they had me cornered, outnumbered, and manipulated into submission. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The room remained silent, all eyes fixed on me waiting for my capitulation. I could feel the weight of their expectation pressing down like a physical force. My mother's smile was tight, with barely contained triumph. "I need to use the bathroom," I said, standing up abruptly. "I will be right back." My mother frowned. "Pete, this is important. We need to resolve this now." "5 minutes," I replied already, walking toward the hallway. Once in the bathroom, I locked the door and pulled out my phone. First, I called Rachel. "They are trying to force me to sign documents transferring my apartment to Madison," I whispered. "They have falsified papers claiming I already verbally agreed. Can you come now? And bring the USB drive from my desk drawer." "On my way," Rachel replied, without hesitation. "Should I call Jackson too?" "Yes, tell him to meet you here. This involves him as well." Next, I texted Jackson directly, "Emergency at my parents' house. My family is trying to manipulate a lease transfer using your name. Can you come? Address to follow?" With my backup en route, I splashed water on my face and took several deep breaths. Then I returned to the dining room, where the atmosphere had grown even more tense during my absence. "Are you ready to sign now?" my mother asked, pushing the papers toward me again. I sat down and looked around the table, making eye contact with each person present. Some, like my Aunt Patricia, looked uncomfortable. Others, like my mother, were impatient. Madison appeared nervous, fidgeting with her napkin. "No," I said clearly. "I am not signing anything." My mother's face hardened. "Pete, do not be difficult. This is for your sister's health and the well-being of your future nieces or nephews. How can you be so selfish?" "This is not about selfishness," I replied calmly. "This is about honesty and respect, neither of which have been present in this situation." "What are you talking about?" my father asked, genuinely confused. I realized then that he might not know the full extent of my mother's scheming. "I am talking about the fact that Mother Madison and Tyler have been entering my apartment without permission when I am at work. They have been going through my personal documents, accessing my computer, and attempting to get information about my lease and mortgage." Shock registered on several faces around the table. My mother quickly tried to recover. "That is ridiculous," she scoffed. "Why would we do that?" "I have proof," I said simply. 17 recordings to be exact. The color drained from my mother's face. Madison gasped audibly. "What recordings?" Tyler asked, his voice cracking. "After noticing things moved in my apartment and receiving a warning about your plans, I installed security cameras. They captured everything, including conversations about your real intentions for my apartment." I turned to my mother. "Would you like me to play the recording where you tell Madison that once I move out, you will make sure I cannot easily move back in? Or perhaps the one where you discuss having a key duplicated without my knowledge?" My mother's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Madison began to cry. Real tears this time. Not the performance from earlier. Or maybe, I continued, turning to Tyler, "you would prefer I play the recording where you tell my mother that the papers should, quote, look legal enough to scare him into compliance. That could be interesting for everyone to hear." The stunned silence in the room was broken by the doorbell. My father, seemingly on autopilot, went to answer it. He returned moments later with Rachel and Jackson in tow. "Perfect timing," I said, standing to greet them. "Everyone you know, Rachel. And this is Jackson, my landlord, and the actual owner of my building." Jackson looked around the room, confused but supportive. "Pete said there was some kind of emergency involving my property." My mother attempted to regain control of the situation. "Jackson, thank you for coming. We were just discussing a temporary arrangement for medical reasons. I believe we spoke on the phone about it." Jackson frowned. "Mrs. Thompson, I have never spoken to you about Pete's apartment. In fact, the only contact I have had regarding his lease was when you called my property manager, claiming Pete wanted to sublet, which he then denied when I checked with him directly." My mother's lie exposed. The room erupted into murmurs and exchanged glances. I used the moment to continue. Rachel has brought copies of some of the recordings which I would be happy to play for everyone. I also have photographs of the falsified documents you prepared, claiming I had verbally agreed to this arrangement. Rachel held up a USB drive, her expression firm but calm. We also have footage of Madison admitting she does not actually have complications requiring bed rest, just normal pregnancy symptoms. Madison burst into tears again, burying her face in her hands. Tyler looked shell-shocked. "This was never about medical necessity," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "This was about wanting my apartment because it is nicer than yours, and using the pregnancy as leverage to manipulate me and the rest of the family." I turned to my extended family members. "You were all brought here under false pretenses. You were told Madison had serious medical complications requiring her to be near the hospital. You were told I was being unreasonably selfish. None of that is true." My Aunt Patricia spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. "Barbara, is this true? Have you been lying to us?" My mother's face had gone from pale to flushed with anger. "I was just trying to help my daughter. Pete has that big apartment all to himself, while Madison and Tyler are going to be cramped with twins. It is not fair." "Life is not about fair, Mother," I replied. "It is about choices and consequences. I chose to save for years and invest in my home. I chose to work 60-hour weeks and live frugally to afford it. Those choices had the consequence of me owning a nice apartment. Your choices today will have consequences too." Jackson stepped forward. "Just to be absolutely clear, there has never been any approved plan to transfer Pete's lease to anyone else. As the building owner, I would never allow such an arrangement without proper documentation and Pete's explicit consent." He turned to me. "And Pete, given what I am hearing, I strongly suggest changing your locks immediately. I will have it done tomorrow at no cost to you." My mother made one last desperate attempt. "Pete, this is your family. Are you really going to choose an apartment over us? Over your own sister and her babies?" "This is not about the apartment anymore," I said, feeling a strange calm despite the chaos around me. "This is about trust and respect. You violated both when you entered my home without permission, went through my personal documents, and tried to manipulate me out of my property with lies and falsified papers." I stood up, gathering my keys and phone. "I am not choosing my apartment over family. You forced this situation by trying to take what is mine through deception. That was your choice, not mine." As I moved toward the door with Rachel and Jackson, the room remained in stunned silence. Just before leaving, I turned back. "The recordings have been backed up to secure cloud storage. I hope we can eventually move past this as a family, but for now, I need space from all of you. And I need my key back." My mother reluctantly slid the duplicated key across the table. I picked it up and walked out, leaving behind the wreckage of trust that had once been my family relationship. The days following the confrontation were surreal. My phone exploded with messages and calls from family members ranging from angry accusations to tearful apologies. I responded to none of them, initially needing time to process what had happened and determine my next steps. True to his word, Jackson arranged for my locks to be changed the next morning. He also added my apartment to the building's security system, which required a key fob for elevator access to my floor. "I cannot believe your family would do something like this," he said, as we tested the new locks. "I have known your mother for years through you. She always seemed so normal." "She has always been controlling," I admitted. "But this is a new level even for her." I think it was the combination of Madison's pregnancy and the chance to get a nice apartment for her favorite child. The perfect storm of opportunity and justification. Rachel stayed with me for several days, concerned about my emotional state. Her support was invaluable, providing both comfort and perspective. "You did the right thing," she assured me when I questioned my decision to expose the scheme so publicly. "They left you no choice. If you had just refused without evidence, they would have painted you as the villain to the entire family." A week after the confrontation, the family narrative began to unravel further. Aunt Patricia called, and this time I answered. "Pete, I owe you an apology." She began, her voice heavy with regret. "I knew Barbara was planning something, but I had no idea it went this far. The unauthorized entry, the falsified documents. I would have spoken up if I had known." "Why did you warn me then?" I asked. "You must have suspected something serious." Barbara has always been manipulative, but usually in smaller ways. The way she was talking about your apartment, like it was already decided you would give it up, it did not sit right with me. But I never imagined she would resort to fraud. Patricia went on to explain that after I left the dinner, the family had turned on each other. My mother blamed Madison for being too obvious about their plans during visits to my apartment. Madison blamed my mother for pushing the scheme too aggressively. Tyler claimed he had only gone along with it to support his pregnant wife. Your father was genuinely shocked by the recordings, Patricia added. I do not think he knew about the unauthorized entries or the attempt to falsify documents. He confronted Barbara after everyone left, and from what my husband overheard, it was their worst fight in 40 years of marriage. The family fracture continued to widen in the following weeks. My cousins Ethan and Megan reached out separately to apologize for their roles in pressuring me. Aunt Barbara told us you had already agreed in principle and just needed a push to finalize things, Ethan explained. I feel like an idiot for not questioning it. Madison and Tyler remained silent for nearly 3 weeks. When they finally contacted me, it was through a lengthy email rather than a call. Pete, there is no excuse for what we did, Madison wrote. I got caught up in Mom's plan and the excitement of potentially having a better place for the babies. What started as a casual comment about how nice your apartment would be for a family turned into Mom's obsession with making it happen. I should have put a stop to it, but instead, I participated. I violated your space and your trust, and I am deeply ashamed. The email went on to explain that she and Tyler had found a new apartment, a 2-bedroom on the first floor of a building, with an elevator not as nice as mine, but functional for their needs. They had signed a 2-year lease and were moving in the following week. We are doing this on our own without Mom's help, Madison emphasized. We need to start taking responsibility for our own lives and choices. My mother's response was the least satisfying. After 2 weeks of alternating between angry texts and tearful voicemails, she sent a carefully worded letter that acknowledged her actions without truly accepting responsibility. I only wanted what was best for Madison and the babies, she wrote. Perhaps I went about it the wrong way, but my intentions were good. Family should support each other, and your apartment would have been such a help to your sister. There was no real apology, just justification dressed up as contrition. It was exactly what I had expected from her. My father, surprisingly, was the most genuinely remorseful. He showed up at my apartment one Saturday morning, looking older and more tired than I had ever seen him. Pete, I failed you as a father, he said simply when I opened the door. I should have questioned what was happening, instead of just going along with it. I should have stood up for you. We talked for hours that day, really talked perhaps for the first time in our adult relationship. He admitted that he had always deferred to my mother in family matters, finding it easier to agree than to challenge her. That stops now, he said firmly. What we did to you was wrong on every level. I have told her that if she wants to save this family, she needs to acknowledge that and make real amends, not just excuses. I was not ready to forgive completely, but it was a start. The conversation with my father opened a small path toward potential reconciliation, at least with him. In an unexpected development, Jackson approached me a month after the incident with a business proposition. I have been thinking about selling some of the units in the building as condos, he explained. Yours would be the first one I convert. Given everything that happened, I would offer you first right of purchase, at a friends and family discount. The opportunity to own my apartment outright, to have the security of knowing it could never be taken from me, was incredibly appealing. With my savings and a new mortgage, I could make it work financially. Within 6 weeks, I had signed the papers, making me the legal owner of apartment 3B. The family situation remained complicated. I maintained minimal contact with my mother, speaking to her only during brief, carefully managed phone calls. Madison and I slowly rebuilt a cautious relationship, beginning with occasional texts about the pregnancy and progressing to a tentative coffee meeting where she apologized again in person. I do not expect you to trust me again anytime soon, she said, her pregnancy now visibly advanced. But I hope someday we can be real siblings again, not just people who share DNA. Throughout it all, Rachel remained my rock, her unwavering support giving me strength when family pressures threatened to overwhelm me. Our relationship deepened through the crisis, each of us learning how the other handled conflict and stress. You know, she said one evening, As we relaxed on my couch, most couples take years to learn what we now know about each other after just a few months of this drama. She was right. The intensity of the situation had accelerated our understanding of each other in ways that might otherwise have taken much longer. It was perhaps the one positive outcome of the whole ordeal. As for the rest of the family, there was a clear division between those who understood the severity of what had happened and those who still thought I had overreacted. Thanksgiving and Christmas loomed on the horizon, promising to be complicated affairs. But for now, I had my apartment, my integrity, and the knowledge that I had stood up for myself when it mattered most. The 17 recordings remained securely stored in the cloud, a digital insurance policy I hoped never to need again. They were a reminder that sometimes the truth is the most powerful weapon against manipulation, and that family ties, while important, should never supersede personal boundaries and respect. 6 months passed since the confrontation at my parents' house. Fall turned to winter, winter to spring, and with the changing seasons came a gradual transformation in my family dynamics as well. The initial shock and anger had subsided, replaced by a cautious new normal that we were all still learning to navigate. The emotional aftermath of betrayal is not something you can simply shake off. In those first few months, I experienced a range of emotions that sometimes surprised me with their intensity. There were nights I woke up in a panic, dreaming that I had returned home to find my locks changed and Madison living in my apartment. There were days when anger would surge unexpectedly, triggered by a random memory or a family photo that appeared on social media. Trust once broken does not mend easily. I found myself questioning other relationships, wondering if people in my life had hidden agendas I was missing. Rachel noticed this growing paranoia and gently encouraged me to speak with a therapist. "What your family did was a major betrayal," she pointed out. "Getting some professional perspective might help you process it without letting it change who you are." She was right as usual. The therapist helped me understand that my feelings were normal responses to an abnormal situation. She also helped me develop strategies for rebuilding relationships on my terms, with appropriate boundaries in place. During this period of healing, I kept minimal contact with my immediate family. I spoke to my father, occasionally exchanged brief texts with Madison about her pregnancy, but maintained distance from my mother. Her continued attempts to justify her actions, rather than truly apologize, made meaningful reconciliation impossible. My relationship with Rachel deepened during this time. What could have been a stress point that drove us apart instead brought us closer. She had seen me at my most vulnerable and stood by me without judgment. In April, I asked her to move in with me. The apartment that my family had tried to take from me was now becoming a shared home, filled with new positive memories. Jackson completed the condo conversion process, and I officially became the owner of my apartment. The security of ownership brought a peace of mind I had not realized I needed. No one could ever again try to manipulate me out of my home. "You know," Jackson said, "after we signed the final paperwork, your mother called me again last month." "What did she want?" I asked, surprised. "She wanted to know if I was still planning to sell the units as condos, and if Madison and Tyler could buy one in the building." I told her all inquiries needed to go through the real estate agent handling the sales. She did not like that answer. It was a small confirmation that while my mother's tactics had changed, her underlying desires had not. She still wanted control, still wanted to arrange things according to her vision. But now, there were barriers. She could not cross boundaries that were firmly established. In late May, Madison gave birth to twin boys healthy, despite arriving 3 weeks early. She sent a photo from the hospital, 2 tiny bundles swaddled in blue. The message attached was simple: "Your nephews would like to meet their uncle whenever you are ready." It was a moment of truth. Could I separate my feelings about what Madison had done from these innocent new lives? After careful consideration, I visited the hospital the next day, bringing 2 small stuffed animals as gifts. Madison looked exhausted, but happy Tyler hovering protectively nearby. The twins, named Samuel and Noah, were impossibly small and perfect. Holding them, feeling their warmth and weight in my arms, I felt something shift inside me. These children were family, regardless of the mistakes their parents had made. "They are beautiful, Madison," I said sincerely. "Congratulations to both of you." "Thank you for coming," she replied, tears in her eyes. "It means more than you know." It was a small step toward reconciliation, but an important one. We did not discuss the past during that visit, focusing instead on the present miracle of new life. But as I was leaving, Madison caught my hand. "Pete, I want you to know that I think about what we did every day. The apartment we have now is perfect for us, and we got it honestly. I am so sorry for everything." For the first time, I felt she truly understood the impact of her actions. "I know, Maddie," I said, using her childhood nickname for the first time in months. "We will work through it one day at a time." My mother's attempts at reconciliation were less successful. She sent a large gift basket after the twins were born with a card that read, "Now that you are an uncle, family is more important than ever. We should put the past behind us." It was typical of her approach: minimize the wrongdoing, emphasize family obligation, and push for a resolution on her terms. I returned the basket with a note explaining that reconciliation required acknowledgement and change, not just the passage of time. This led to my father calling his voice weary. "Your mother is very hurt that you returned her gift." "Dad, she is still trying to manipulate the situation," I explained. "There has been no real accountability, just attempts to sweep everything under the rug." He sighed. "I know. I have tried to explain that to her, but she cannot see it. Would you consider family therapy? All of us together with a professional mediator?" It was a reasonable suggestion, and after discussing it with my own therapist, I agreed. The first session was tense and uncomfortable. My mother attempted to control the narrative until the therapist firmly redirected her. By the third session, we had established some basic ground rules for communication and begun the difficult work of addressing what had happened openly and honestly. Progress was slow and uneven. There were setbacks and arguments, moments when it seemed easier to walk away than continue the hard work of rebuilding trust. But there were also breakthroughs, like when my mother finally admitted 6 months into therapy that her actions had been driven by a lifelong pattern of favoring Madison and believing she knew what was best for everyone. "I convinced myself I was helping both of you," she said. "Madison would get the apartment she needed, and Pete would feel good about helping his sister. I could not see that I was actually trying to control both your lives to fit my vision of how things should be." It was the most honest she had ever been, and while it did not erase the past, it created space for a different kind of future. As Christmas approached, Madison and Tyler invited me and Rachel to their apartment for a small celebration with the twins now 7 months old. My parents would come the following day, a scheduling decision that acknowledged the still healing family dynamics. Sitting in their cozy living room, watching Samuel and Noah play with wrapping paper, more interested in it than the actual gifts, I felt a sense of peace I had not expected. Their apartment was indeed perfect for them, warm and child-friendly, in ways mine could never be. The twins had room to crawl and explore their toys and books already filling the spaces. "We are thinking of buying a house next year," Tyler mentioned. "Something with a yard for the boys to play in." "That sounds perfect," I replied, genuinely happy for them. "Let me know if you need help with the move." Madison smiled, catching the significance of the offer. It was the first time I had volunteered to help them with anything since the confrontation. A small gesture, but meaningful in its implication that trust was slowly being rebuilt. Later that evening, as Rachel and I walked back to our apartment through light snow, she squeezed my hand. "You seem lighter tonight, more at peace." "I think I am," I realized. "Not because I have forgotten what happened, but because I have learned from it. About myself, about my family, about what really matters." What I had learned was complex and still evolving, but at its core was a simple truth. Family should lift you up, not tear you down for their benefit. Love should never be used as leverage for manipulation. And sometimes the hardest but most necessary thing you can do is establish firm boundaries with those closest to you. The 17 recordings still existed, secured in digital storage I hoped never to access again. They were a reminder of a painful chapter in my life, but no longer its defining feature. Instead, I chose to focus on the new recordings being created. Videos of the twins laughing, audio messages from my father as he learned to communicate more openly, photos of Rachel and me, building our life together in the apartment that was now truly ours. Family relationships are complex, imperfect, and constantly evolving. The betrayal I experienced did not disappear, but its power to hurt me diminished as I reclaimed my narrative and established new, healthier connections built on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. Have you ever had to establish boundaries with family members who crossed the line? Did you find a way to reconcile? Or was distance the healthier option? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to stand up for yourself, even against family. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength and clarity in navigating your own family dynamics.